A very good evening to everybody who has joined us for yet another session of Tinkerpreneur. Today we have a very special guest with us, Ms. Varya Srivastav. She will be conducting a session on building a product with no-code tools. Varya is the head of product and government affairs at Network Capital, which is a career advancement platform. Varya has a bachelor's in political science and a diploma in conflict transformation and peace building from University of Delhi. Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you, Varya, for helping us in conducting this session. I would now like to hand it over to you for taking the session forward.
Yeah, thank you so much for the lovely introduction, Tanvi, and thank you to everyone who's joined in. It's particularly special doing this session considering, Tinkerpreneur is something that's very close to me and then the entire ATL Innovation Mission team. And it's also very special doing a session on building products with no code because most of my experience with product is primarily, or at least in the initial stage, been through the lens of no code. So with that, I have a small presentation for all of you that I'd like to walk you through. And then we can also get into some Q&As and I'll be happy to answer your questions around that. So to begin with, what is no code, right? It seems almost counterintuitive to think about building tech products and having no code as a part of it. How does no code really work? What does no code even mean? So there are today a bunch of tools, platforms that enable you to build small products or small forms of automation that require no code. All you need to do them is actually figure out the logic. So I know you've all had sessions on, building a chatbot. So if you think about it, chatbot is a very, very interesting example of a no code product. If today I asked you to build a chatbot from scratch, it'll take you hours, if not days, of coding to get the chatbot right. And even then, it probably wouldn't be as sophisticated as some of the no code chatbots that you can make today. So, therefore, no code is identifying certain prominent use cases that technology has and building, replicable models of it. That is, if you want to build a chatbot, this is the basic you'll need despite whatever kind of chatbot you want, and then you add alterations. So chatbot is just one example. Today there are thousands of products and services that you can use to actually build working products. You'll be surprised to know how many companies and funded startups today actually rely on no code, both for the products they build as well as internal working. Until what stage? Of course, every company reaches a stage where they can't use no code anymore, but even despite that, for a large part of their growth and development, they continue to use these platforms. So that's part one. What is no code? The second is actually thinking about who is it for. Is no code just for people who don't understand tech? Is no code just for people who are products? Is it for people who have very specific kind of products? And the simple answer to all these questions is no. Actually, no code is for everyone. And rather you'll rather a lot of people very familiar with tech, coders, programmers, they use no code for the ease of use. As a product builder, manager, entrepreneur, the ultimate thing you're looking for is not necessarily for the sophistication of the product, but actually thinking about, is this something that someone will use? Is this something that someone will pay me money for? Or is this something that will add value to the potential target audience that I have for it? So, yes, no code is for everyone. You might be someone with a technical background, non-technical background. You're free to use it. And then the final is, why should you care? Why should you even consider no code when it obviously is something very new? And that's what a lot of today's presentation is about. Why should you consider no code and why it's valuable? And the reason that this session is positioned at the part of the bootcamp that it is to tell you that up until now you've learned a bunch of technical skills. You've learned about robotics, drone building, Arduino circuits, and whatnot. You've learned about Python, HTML coding. And today I'm telling you that, you might not have to know all of that to build your product. And there are two reasons for that. One is that knowing something and using something are two different things. You can have very good knowledge about a specific area. That does not mean you necessarily need to apply it to build something. And the second is, if you do choose to do that, and if you're someone who didn't completely understand a specific skill or a specific technology, there are always ways to go about around it. So you don't need to give up just because you didn't understand, say, coding in Python. So with that, let me get started um, with, sort of thinking about why build with no code. I initially sort of implied that there are a lot of companies that use no code in their initial days. There are a lot of companies that continue using no code even after they've grown somewhat. But let's come back and come down to the fundamental idea of why no code even exists in the first place. And I think the most powerful of the four things that I've mentioned is actually testing an idea. So, most startups that exist today fail. Most entrepreneurs who try fail. And in this case, the only thing that matters as you go ahead is sort of testing and iterating consistently. Which is to say that if you identify a problem statement, it could be something as simple as, if you're in Delhi today, like I am, it's extremely hot. And you think that, okay, climate change and heat waves is a problem you'd like to address, and you have some solution around it. Maybe the solution is helping people who are homeless find shelters where they can stay cool. And for that, you want to sort of compile the list of all homeless shelters that exist and all the people who are in need of it and sort of matching it. So think of it like the way Uber connects you to a driver, your product is connecting people without a place to stay with the nearest shelter that they can avail. There are multiple ways of going about this idea. What I just explained to you is one. There is a very high likelihood that the solution I came up with is incorrect, it fails, or it's missing a lot of important things. One thing that I can think upfront is that maybe someone who is homeless will not have access to technology. They will not be able to, the way we use Uber to find a cab, they will not be able to, you know, use technology to find the nearest shelter. So, a lot of using no code is actually spending a lot of time just thinking about the idea extensively, is really going deep into the problem statement you have, speaking to the audience or the customers or your user base that you have, and then going back and thinking of what it is that you can do to address this problem. So people who typically use no code are the ones who actually prioritize the idea and the solution over the technical infrastructure. A problem that a lot of people, especially early on in their journey as product managers or entrepreneurs, sort of succumb to is they focus on, making the product very sophisticated, making it very precise in a particular manner, and in process what they do is they often miss at what and how is the product going to be used. Think about any app you use, right? Maybe it's a game that you play online, or maybe it's something else. You'll often notice that the app is updated very regularly. Some apps are updated as frequently as 2 to 3 times a week, which is to say that even an established app is always work in progress. The team that's building it is always iterating it and making it better. This iteration is the most important in the early days because, as you'll explore in some of our future sessions on building products, there's something called product market fit. So, in very simple terms, product market fit is basically getting the app or the idea that you have to an audience that values it and is ready to pay money for it in the simplest sense. And to reach this state, right, you need to try multiple times till you get it. A very classic example of this is that of Amazon. So when Amazon was actually set up, they used to only sell books online. Like today, if you want, you can buy literally anything and everything off of Amazon. But in its early days, Amazon just helped people buy books online. Once they were able to get the book buying process to a very good stage, when they reached the product market fit for the book buying process online, did they start adding all other things that you see today? So, just the way Amazon started small with a very specific idea and then scaled it, the same is true for any successful app or product that comes out. So, no, using no code is extremely critical for testing your idea. The second is about making entrepreneurship accessible. So, what's interesting is that not all entrepreneurs or founders come with technical background. Like you might have heard in my own introduction, I actually studied political science. I studied, a lot of about how war and conflict happens in the world and tried to make sense of it. So it's fair to assume that I was as away from the world of technology as one can possibly be. Yet I lead products for a fairly large company today. So, how does that happen? How do you go from someone who has no understanding to products to leading it? And a lot of that has to do with no code, because if you're not really limited by your ability to code things, you can then again actually find valuable insights and problem statements and use no code to build it out. If you study, there's a very interesting book um, that's called The Techies and the Fuzzies, which talks about how in the world you need the technologists to come with the artists and the thinkers together to actually build interesting products and companies. And while the ideal situation is to help the thinker or the artist find a technological partner, it's not always feasible, in which case actually having no code tools makes entrepreneurship accessible to everyone. I'm sure there are so many students in this boot camp who don't come from the sciences background. You might be studying social sciences, you might be studying commerce, and yet you might want to explore the world of entrepreneurship, in which case no code is the easiest and the best way to go forward. The third is on iterating fast. And if you come think about it, the first idea is that imagine if you're building a solution and you spend hours just doing tech and development work for it to only realize that the way you were addressing the problem is wrong. That's so many hours and so much time gone. And in the startup world, time is of absolute importance. If you don't iterate fast and if you don't get your product out fast, you will never be able to actually, quote unquote, win the market. You won't be able to get the kind of feedback that you need um, to actually succeed. So, iterating fast is the most obvious use case of using no code products. And then the final, and I think that's personally the most valuable to me, is focusing on the user. If you're not worried about how you're going to develop your product, what will go into it, what do you need, you can actually focus on the problem and the user. You can spend hours instead of coding and developing things, actually speaking to your potential customer and your user base to understand what is it that they're really looking forward to, what do they want to get out of the product and the entire experience. And which is why I again say, in a boot camp where we're teaching you so many technical skills, you must absolutely learn all of them. But you should not limit yourself. You should not limit yourself to the skills you know. You'll be surprised to know how technology evolves so rapidly, right? Every day there's a new form, new approach coming up, and it's humanly impossible to keep up with it. And while you should constantly keep exploring that, you should not limit yourself or limit the pace of your growth to your ability to learn, especially when you have things like no code that can make it so easy and accessible for you to build out products. Now, let's actually get into the details, the nuts and bolts of it. What are no code tools, right? Like I'm saying no code so many times now. What does it even mean? What does no code really mean? What's interesting before I get into this about no code is that there's no one solution. Rather, the beauty of no code is that you combine a bunch of things and make your own form of no code. It's, like cooking, like you have all these ingredients. Now, what you cook, it could be, like idli and sambar, or it could be a omelette. It just depends on what um, permutation and combination of no code tools that you end up using. As I say this, I'd also like to add a lot of these no code tools are paid. Like you need to pay money to be able to access them. But the great thing about most, if not all of them, is that they all have a free version. So for you to just get started, you can always just use the free version and go for it. What happens in the free version is that the branding is visible of that particular no code tool that you're using. For example, Google Forms is a great example of a no code tool. And if you're using Google Forms, it very clearly shows that it is a Google form. And that's about it. So, what will often happen is that just the tool or platform you're using that will be visible, and you can for all other practical means and purposes continue using the no code tool that is there. Now, and on the screen, you will see this entire no code landscape, and I'll get into that. But I also want to share some of the no code types or types of tools that have been the most helpful for me. The first is website builders. So, for anything you're doing on the internet, I think website is the single most important thing to get right. It could be as simple as like a static website with just content to as complex as a dynamic website that allows payment and transaction and interaction and all sorts of things. And there are multiple no code tools that will help you build websites, starting just from your Google website as an example, to things like Wix and Squarespace and so many other platforms that are there. So, website is the first use case. The second is apps. So, just the way you can build website, you can also build apps in a no-code format. Um, Here you'll see mobile applications. So, Aldo, Glide, Thunkable, Appy Pie. They're all good examples of apps or platforms that you can use to build out apps. And by apps here, I mean like proper functional app. You can make a very simplistic version of, say, a Zomato or a Swiggy using these apps. It might not be as complex and sophisticated with all the algorithms like an actual Swiggy or a Zomato is, but it will be a working prototype for you to begin with. And another thing that I'll add in no code is also actually the payment layer of things, right? So the beauty of the internet today is you can actually, with safe transaction, transfer money from one person to the other. And there are multiple Indian companies now that enable you to do that. Sorry. Razorpay is one of the most successful examples of this. And you can create a Razorpay link to enable payment through your app, through your website, or just through sending a one time use link. The next is around automation. So, as an entrepreneur, you'll be surprised how much of your time just goes in doing, manual repetitive tasks. These tasks could be like sending things like emails, it could be, you know, um, adding people from one database to the other, or something of that sort. So, actually, a lot of exploring and learning and working as an entrepreneur is actually getting rid of these manual tasks. And there are, again, brilliant tools that exist that help you do this. Zapier is the most popular one, but there's something called automate.io. There is integromat, in which you can connect one um, what do you call no code tool for the other. For example, if you want to connect your website to, say, a payment gateway, you can use something like Zapier to do that. The next is on data collection. So collecting leads of your prospective customers, collecting information on, other things that are important from your business perspective is again a very important thing that you need to do to build a successful product. Data is probably one of the single most important drivers of your product and of your business. So there are multiple ways to collect data. Google Sheets is probably the most reliable one, but others include things like Airtable, AppSheet, and so on. Um, and you can look at this. And then the next is platforms. So a lot of these are individual tools, but you can look at complete platforms in itself. You'll be surprised to know how many businesses are built or companies are built on top of platforms like YouTube, like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, so on. So you don't need to necessarily build something completely independent. You can also just use existing platforms to do it. uh, there are so many YouTubers today who have built $1 million businesses just using YouTube and a few other of these no code platforms. And they do phenomenally well for themselves. They're probably one of the most successful entrepreneurs of our generation, and they're enabling so many other people to do the same. So also always consider platforms. And when I give you the case study of Network Capital and our product journey going forward in today's session, you'll hear about how we started from Facebook and how that from there we have gone to build out our own independent platform and so on. So yeah, coming to the Network Capital case study. So Network Capital was initially set up as a Facebook group. So the idea was that there are so many of us who are looking for the right career guidance, so many of us looking for the right mentorship and support. We have questions about what is the right college, which is the next good sector to learn or explore in, what is a good company to work at. And the unfortunate thing is finding answers to these questions is so difficult unless and until you are lucky or happen to be at the right place at the right time. Most of the time you'll end up making decisions based on incomplete information and without the right guidance. So essentially Network Capital was set up with the idea that we all have something we know uniquely well, and there are so many others who want to know more about it. So if you created a community where people could learn from each other and teach each other, you'll actually enable students and young professionals to make better career choices. And for that, we just set up a closed Facebook group, which is that you need to be accepted to join the group. But once you're in it, you can invite other people and so on and so forth. So in 2016, when Network Capital was set up, it was just a closed Facebook group. With it, in less than a year from the initial group of about say 1,000 people, the community scaled to be that of almost 30,000 people, which is where you will say we hit the quote unquote product market fit. So let me take a step back and walk you through the first year, right? The first year was just creating community, bringing all these people from across the world to one Facebook group and getting them to learn with each other, share their unique insights and ideas, and just create a community of learning. Within this, we tried multiple things. We tried matching mentor mentees one on one. We tried doing offline events for people to meet to each other. And some things worked and some things didn't. And getting that data on things that worked versus things that didn't actually made building Network Capital so much more easier in hindsight. So first year, just building a Facebook community and enabling people to learn from each other. When that started working and working actually very well, we actually looked at, okay, is there a way we can monetize? Can we build a business layer around it? Can we build a business model around it? Which is when the subscription idea came about. So today, for example, if you want to, use Netflix or Hotstar or Amazon Prime, you pay a subscription fee every month or every year to access it. So we use the similar model. We were like, okay, fine, we'll build a subscription community in which people pay 350 rupees every month to join Network Capital. And if they pay and do that, they'll get, a little bit more curated community. They'll have access to other people, some of our events, and so on and so forth. So this is when we started monetizing, and we created a closed subscription community in the second year of our existence. Now, let me pause here and tell you something. This is almost 2 years of existence of Network Capital with us being profitable, with us making money, but no time spent on coding and product development. Here, the focus was simply to understand the users, that is, the young students and young working professionals, and what is the support system or the ecosystem that they need to do well professionally. So, as an entrepreneur, the founder spent most of his time just understanding the user and the audience and not worrying too much about the product. That said, he made sure that the community was monetizable and the community was making some money to just validate the idea. It is only in 2020, when there were over 1,000 paying subscribers of Network Capital, that an independent product was built and different services and things were built around that. And the reason for that shift happening was that the product had reached a particular stage where, for it to grow further, you do need to build out the tech infrastructure to do it, which is when we say hired our first developer. We hired the first person to build something out, and we did that when we knew specifically how that product needs to be built. So the first almost 2.5 3 years was completely no code, with a focus on understanding the customer and making sure you're able to monetize the product. Now that the company has its own product, it has its own web application, mobile application, and a bunch of other things, that the focus is on how do you refine this product, how do you even make it better. And like I was saying in the beginning, right, most successful products actually are updated and iterated upon consistently. The minute as a product manager you stop experimenting, trying, and getting better, your product starts to lose its value and importance. So that iteration always will continue happening. But the initial stage does not need to be tech heavy. So as we move on from what the startup ecosystem calls the 0 to 1 journey to the 1 to 10 journey, here is where, yes, absolutely, having clear technical skills is extremely important. If I don't understand the basics of wireframing, if I don't understand UI/UX, I will not be able to communicate it to my developers and designers on what it is that I really want. But till the 0 to 1 stage, which is, the absolute early days of getting started, you don't necessarily need to build out complex products, especially true for products that are B2C, which is, you know, built for consumers directly. There are always obviously products that are deeply technical, that are complex and require critical research and development work to get started. um, Things like a Google search engine are very obvious examples of that. You can't have a no code version of Google today. That said, you can have a no code version of Zomato, of Airbnb, of Swiggy, and these companies. So it's also just understanding what your product is. Is it a deeply technical product? In which case, yes, please spend that time on the research and development work to build it out. But if it's not, if it's a consumer facing product, then most likely no code for the early stage will work wonders for you. It'll help you cut costs, it'll help you move fast. And like I said, more importantly, it'll help you spend time with the most important people in your life, your customers. Um, So the next, and it's a slightly complex question, right? If building products is easy, as I say, or as I said in this presentation, it was, right? You could literally find no code tools and products and build products with such ease. Then, as an entrepreneur or a product manager or a product leader, what do you spend your time doing? What do you focus on, and what is then the entire premise of building products if it is not technical competency? Because for a very long time, building great products was about having great technical competency. Now that that's not completely true, what do you think about? So the first is actually thinking on problem statements. You'll be surprised to know that, say if you're an ed tech entrepreneur, you know broadly the things you are solving for or the things you're addressing for. What differentiates a successful entrepreneur from an unsuccessful entrepreneur is just their understanding of the problem statement and their insight on how to address the problem. If you don't get that part right, you can build a very good product and have it completely fail. So if I were to start building a new product from scratch today, let's take that example again. Like if I truly had to address the problem of homelessness in heat or summers in Delhi, what would I do? I'd start with the problem statement and identify, okay, when is this problem the most acute? Clearly, there are 3 to 4 months of summer when this happens. So, when I'm addressing this problem, I just need to focus on these 4 months. I don't really need to focus on the other months throughout. Then I need to see, is that okay? Are there specific pockets or places where there are more people um, who are homeless versus other? Because Delhi is a vast geographical landscape. You will not find the equal number of homeless people in all parts of the city. So maybe I'd start by mapping out and seeing what are the spaces where they are the most. Then I'd look at, okay, is there a way we can offline without using the internet? If there is an offline way in which I can reach them and share the information about the nearest shelters, there might be people who might be hesitant to come into the shelters. Is there something I can do to make, what product managers call onboarding to the product easier? And then be like, okay, once they're onboarded, what can I do to make their experience and stay as delightful as possible? So, before you start getting into building complex products, just understand your problem statement well. Understand why does it exist, what are the multiple ways you can solve it, and what are the multiple ways this problem can get worse. Because you know it is highly likely that if I start addressing the problem of homelessness in summers, I might make it worse for people. I might create a situation where we have over full homeless shelters, in which case even the people who were initially getting access to it, they're not able to use the space well. So overcrowding could be a possible negative implication that could come across if I start addressing this problem. So you need to be cognizant of all of these things, and the only way you can do that is by spending enough time going deep and understanding what it is that you're truly trying to solve for. The next is customer delight and experience, right? Think about all the products you use and then think about the products that you use again and again. There is some aspect of delight to it. There's some aspect of, I liked it. That was such a nice thing that that product did. It could be in form of a meme that the product added. It could be in form of the color scheme that they have. It could be in form of a notification or message that they gave that you resonated with. So once you have a good and functioning product, delight becomes the most important thing. Because it's interesting, but most humans don't use products just because of the inherent use. Not It's not just a productive act of using a product. If you have to order food, you will not just use a Zomato or a Swiggy just for the act of ordering food. You'd also use it that, okay, maybe they will give me some additional cutlery with my food, or they will make the ability for me to track where my food is easier, which is why I will use, say, a Zomato or a Swiggy to order, as opposed to ordering it directly from the restaurant I want to eat from. So the reason why people use products just does not have to do with the utility of the product, but has to do with the overall experience. And companies and entrepreneurs and product managers who get the delight aspect right are the ones who are able to retain their customers, which is the next point. So in India, there's a very interesting phenomena that product managers often go through, which is that, Indians love downloading products or apps. Think about all the apps you've downloaded on your phone or your parents' phone in the last year, and think about the apps that you actually use. So in India, the ability to get someone to download the app is actually very, very easy. But to get someone to use the app again and again and find value out of it is extremely, extremely hard. um, Unfortunately, a lot of companies, measure their success on the number of app downloads that they have, which is a good metric to get started with, but it's not a efficient metric, because just because someone has downloaded the app by no means that they're using it. It does not mean that the company will be able to monetize that user, or it does not mean that the user is deriving value from the app. Therefore, retention in terms of actually getting people to use the product again and again, engage with it, is very, very important. Companies who are not able to retain their users more often than not end up failing. A very interesting example of this these days is that of Netflix. So I'm not sure if you saw the news recently, but Netflix, for the first time since its growth, lost customers. It lost users. And now they're obviously doing different things to course correct and find solutions for it. The reason that this is alarming is that if they don't have new users joining in actively, and if they continue having users leave their product, their overall business will shrink. Um, and this is not just true for big companies, it is also true for small companies. Think of it as this: if you're running a small grocery store in your neighborhood, and instead of, and you have like five people who come to you on day one to buy groceries from you. If those five people don't come back again and a new five come, you'll always still only have five customers. You will succeed only when those five people keep coming daily, then another five come, and then another five come, which means that you have 15 customers in total. So you need to look at net customers, that is, new customers coming in plus old customers coming back in again, is very simply what retention is. And retention is something that not too many products focus on, but in my experience, it's probably the most important thing, because only when people come back to a product again and again do they also refer people. So think about it. Think about the products and apps you use and how you found out about it. Most people find out about products and apps not through paid marketing, but by friends telling each other. So I had a friend recently tell me about this very interesting app on which I can find up and coming authors and read books. I downloaded that app immediately and I read it, not because, some marketing campaign targeted it at me, but because a friend told me and I trust her advice. Uh, so if you have retention well, you'll also have good word of mouth marketing and reach and so on. And in general, your business and product will do well. And now finally coming to the business model. Today, there are so many ways to monetize. Subscription is one option, one-time payments is the other, and we have an entire section focused on different forms of business model that you'll be learning. So if you don't need to worry too much about the product, you can actually innovate in the business model space. Some of the companies that have done really, really well are the ones that have taken an existing business and just added a new business model to it, which makes sense for the consumers and have made such profitable businesses. So people miss that, it's not just product innovation that you need to be a successful entrepreneur. You can also just have brilliant business model innovation and it'll make it easier for people to join. And I'll tell you why business model innovation is important, because that just makes the economics of running a business manageable. So there are a lot of costs of running a business. There are multiple aspects of running a business, which from the outside we seem to forget. But if you ask an entrepreneur, getting the basic profit, loss, and margins right is probably the most important thing a founder focuses on. So if you can't innovate on a product, maybe you take an old product and just add a new business model to it, and that'll make things easier. Netflix, actually, coming back to that example, is a good case study on business model innovation. So Netflix started, so before the advent of internet and all things that come with it, if you wanted to watch a movie, you would basically have to rent a CD. A lot of you or your parents might have done that, where you went to, um, stores and cafes to buy CDs and movies to watch. Sorry. So what Netflix basically did was it created a subscription business, and they to your house delivered one new movie every month. On average, they saw that every family saw at least a movie every month, but it took a lot of effort for them to go to the store, get it, and so on and so forth. And they would often have to buy a movie which they would only watch once. So the cost became unnecessary. All Netflix did was they made it a subscription where a CD would be sent to their house every month and the old CD would be taken back. This made it economic for a family to watch movies. It made it easy for Netflix because it had to have a specific amount of CDs in rotation. And they grew on to become such a big company today. They obviously have newer challenges today, which is why as a product they need to keep iterating and innovating. But business model as an innovation to become profitable is a great place as a founder you can spend time on if you're not focusing on products. So with that, I'm actually done with the presentation I have prepared. I know a lot of you have questions for me, so I will get started with that. So the first is, so can you replace code with no code? Sorry, no code with code. And the simple answer to that is yes, but only in the initial days. So like in the example I gave you of network capital, it's only in the 0 to 1 stage were we able to replace no code, sorry, code with no code. So when you're starting out and you're early and you're just testing an idea, there you absolutely can do it. And this is specifically true if your app or a product is consumer facing and does not require complex technical infrastructure. Uh, but if it is something simple, then yes, you absolutely can build a no code product to get started with. Once you've reached a particular stage and critical mass, then it makes sense to invest in building out the product, building out the code, doing all of that. But that comes a little later. Um, can we create an app without code? Yes, absolutely. Like I gave you, right? Swiggy, Zomato, very easy to make apps. You can very easily make them using no code platforms and get started. And I saw a question on where can I find out about no code tools? Easiest, just Google. You can Google something as simple as how do I make a no code app of Swiggy. I'm just using Swiggy and Zomato as examples because I'm assuming everyone will be familiar with that. But it's true for anything. Technically, if you want, you can also make a no code version of a Twitter or a Facebook and so on and so forth. So just Google it. Google is honestly a great way to figure out answers for most questions, especially when it comes to product and tech. I learned so many things that I know today just by Googling it and figuring some time going through the recommendations Google gave my way. Yes, you can build a no-code chatbot with absolute ease. Rather, chatbot, like I said, is one of the most popular examples of mainstream no-code products. So build a chatbot. You can build more than a chatbot. A lot of people go even a step further and they build complete customer service teams using no-code chatbots. So if you make a slightly more complex chatbot, you can also use that for customer service or query resolution, or if you know that there are some questions that your customers ask very frequently, which is a lot of people call them frequently asked questions and FAQs and so on. If you want to make a more interactive and fun FAQ, you can use a chatbot to do that as well. You can't make your own browser using no code, that is for sure. You can make your own website using no code. So I'll tell you the difference, and it's actually a very, very good question to have. So, browser implies a lot of technical infrastructure. And if you're building something with a lot of technical infrastructure, by default, you can't use no code. That said, if you're building a website which does not require complex technical infrastructure, you can. So for browser, no. For website, yes. What is better, code or no code? So I would say it depends on what stage of your journey you are. If you're early stage, I would recommend no code, just because you can move quicker, you can do a lot more things. If you're mid stage to late stage, if you're mid stage, I would say use a combination of code and no code. And if you're late stage, you by default have to use code only. So I would say it's not a question of either or. Look at it as a spectrum and get to it. So a good example for this is when you learn how to write as kids, you're often told to start writing with a pencil, right? So that if you make a mistake, you can use an eraser and move ahead. So think of no code as your pencil to get started. When you're in middle school, which is fifth to eighth grade, for some subjects you're allowed a pencil, for some subjects you're allowed a pen, and you use it interchangeably. Even when you're using a pen, at least in my school, they were very particular. You can only use an ink pen or a fountain pen, not like a ballpoint pen or something of that sort. So that's the in between stage where you're learning code, but you also go back to no code, and you're managing between both. And when you get to high school, which is 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, you can just use a pen. You can't go back and use a pencil, unless maybe if you're drawing, I don't know. So think of it like that. There is nothing that's better or worse. I love writing with a pen as much as with a pencil. It just requires you to understand what makes sense where. And I would say start with no code and then make your way towards code. Free domain names are a little difficult to get. If you're able to find a free domain name, congratulations, that's a great steal. Go for it. Website, yes, you can build for free, but like I said, what might happen is the branding of the tool you use to build the website might be there. So if you say Google websites, Google Sites or Google website, the Google website logo might be there. If you use Wix, the Wix logo and things might be there. You can remove it, but to remove it, you will just have to pay some money to Wix and so on. So I wouldn't worry too much about the Wix branding or the Google branding to be there. I don't think that makes too much of a difference. Yes, actually, games can be made using no code. There is something called Bubble. You can look up bubble.com. A lot of companies have used Bubble for gaming, and there are again a lot of tools. The good thing about no code tools is that new no code tools keep coming up every day. So just Google if there is a specific type of game, because there are so many types of games that exist. Hypothetically, if you want to build a racing game, just Google how can I build a racing game with no code. I can guarantee you will get so many answers for this, and you can do that. Let me actually try. Yeah, see, let me just quickly share my screen and show you guys that it is quite literally possible. Yeah, see, there's something called uh, Code Tude Plus that you can use. There's Code Incomplete, there's Unity. So all these things that are there, you can build box. You can go through this. And I did something as simple as just Google build a racing uh, game using no code. And you'll find multiple ways of doing that. It's as simple as Googling and trying to find the right combination of tool to do it. Yes, Google's Teachable is a no-code platform. There are a lot of Google actually has done a brilliant job of making no-code tools accessible to people. Google Sheets, Google websites, presentations, so on and so forth. They're great. And one more thing I'll add, which I realized I didn't touch upon, is that you can obviously use no code. You can also use like other things that make your work easier. So Canva is a great example for, say, a lot of you who want to get your design work right. Otherwise, getting, good graphics is a fairly complex task. You'll need to maybe learn Adobe or this or that, which is fairly technical. Things like Canva and a lot of other similar tools make it easier for you to do that. So also there is one part of looking at no code tools. The other part is looking at tools that make doing other things easier. And for design, Canva is one good example. There are similar things for others as well. If you're writing and if you want to just say maybe get your writing checked and copywriting done well, you can use the free version of Grammarly to do that. So a lot of these tools are not just helpful for technical things, but also getting non-technical complex things right. Yes, websites are made of no code. Most websites are actually today no code. They use things like Wix, they use things like Google websites. There is something called Webflow. All of these are no code. Actually, very few websites today are built using code from scratch. Most of them are no code. Maybe we can wait for another minute to see if there are any more questions. If not, then please feel free to reach out to me if you have more questions. I'm happy to share my email ID. That's Varya, Varya at networkcapital.tv, networkcapital.tv. You can send me your questions, but I would say more than sending me your questions, use Google to find answers for yourself, because most times in life, no one will give you a straight answer. You'll just have to, like an entrepreneur, iterate and figure a way out to get to it. And I think if there's one thing you take away from today's session, it would be that entrepreneurship and building products is fairly easy if you make it easy. You don't need to use complicated technology, you don't need to do difficult things. You just need to start with a problem statement that you care about and work your way from there. Don't get, like overwhelmed by so many things that are happening in the boot camp. Don't get overwhelmed by the so many things happening in the world around you. Just pick your problem statement and step by step work towards building a solution around it, then a product, and then maybe a business model. And I promise you, you'll be one of the few successful entrepreneurs that we see. So yeah, that's all from my end today. Thank you everyone for joining in, and Tanvi, over to you.
Thank you, Varya. Thank you so much for conducting the session. And it was highly engaging, and I'm sure everybody who had joined us, they have definitely learned a lot. And yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining the session. We will be sharing the details of the next Tinkerpreneur session soon.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good day.